You're listening to A Strange Arrangement.
Welcome back to the show where we take old songs, break them apart, and then build them back up in different ways. And today's show is a little different than usual. You may remember in season 1 I did a couple episodes where I talked about changing the rhythm or the time signature, and how those changes can alter the feel of a song. I wanted to do some episodes in a similar way this season, but I wanted to work on something different. As a drummer, I'm pretty good with rhythm, but one of the reasons why I started this show was to help myself learn new things or to get better at things I kind of had a grasp on. So I thought, what is something that I can dig into that I need to learn more about? And the first answer I came up with was modes. Now, a couple of disclaimers. First of all, this episode is going to be a bit music theory heavy, and if that's not really your thing, I totally understand. We'll have a regular episode in 2 weeks. I'll also put timestamps in the episode description in case you want to scroll ahead to anything. Secondly, we'll be talking about modes as described in Western Eurocentric music theory. Now, this concept can be applied in different musical settings and can be called different things across cultures, but in this episode, it will be described most closely to how it is presented in Western Eurocentric music theory. And finally, while I've learned a lot on this topic, I hardly consider myself an expert, and I'll put a bibliography in the show notes of the episode. Okay, so modes. Modes can be described as the characteristics of scales. Scales being the combinations of notes used to make melodies, harmonies, chords, songs, etc. If you ever practice playing a major scale in music lessons, like a C scale, that's a mode. That major scale starts on C and goes C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then ends on the next C. Now, for the sake of not boring you to death, and at the risk of greatly oversimplifying, I'm going to explain this in a relatively quick way. By altering the notes in that major scale, you can get different modes, each one having a different feeling. There are 7 most frequently referred to modes used to build music based off of the Western European music theory. And that may seem like a lot, but good news is you already know 2. Very quickly, and with references, those modes are the Ionian mode, which is your major scale, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, which is your natural minor scale, and Locrian. Now, the 2 most commonly used modes are the Ionian, the major scale, and the Aeolian, which is the minor scale. The major is described as having a relatively cheerful sound, used in songs like this, and this. Sitting in the morning sun. And Aeolian has a relatively sad sound, used in songs like this. Ain't no sunshine when she's gone. And this. I can't go for that. But what about these other modes? What do these sound like? How do you use them? That's what I wanted to explore. For example, what about Lydian mode? Lydian mode is where you take that major scale of notes and you bring the 4th note a half step up, making it higher. So in the C scale, you're going to take that F note and make it higher, and that will sound like this. It's not used super often by itself, and when musicians do use it, they often talk about it as a tool for improvising solo. Still, here's one example. And another. The Lydian mode is frequently described as a very bright mode, with this raised 4th note leading into the 5th and subsequently raising the harmony and the sound of the music in the process. Often musicians will use this mode when they want to portray a feeling of lightness or dreaminess, hope and triumph, or even quirkiness. This all depends, of course, on the context, the style, and the arrangement, and who you are, and if that's what that sounds like to you. So what I wanted to do, in order to see the mode in action, was take a popular song in major scale that people are familiar with, and put it into a Lydian mode and see what that does. How does it change the melody? And how do you have to alter the harmony in order to make it sound like what you're looking for? So in order to do that, I had to find a song that uses the fourth note a lot. If we're in the key of C, that note is F. And one song that I found that uses the fourth note a fair amount is Frere, Jacques, or Are You Sleeping in the English translation. If you're unfamiliar, it's a French lullaby that's been around for ages, and in C major, it sounds like this. Okay, now let's put it into C Lydian by raising the F note up, making it F sharp. Now the melody will sound like this. Now, I don't know about you, but initially that feels very strange to me. Hearing this song, which I've heard throughout my life, thrown into a new mode and given a new feeling, it's jarring. It takes some getting used to. I had to play it several times to get used to it and to start thinking about it as its own separate thing. So now let's play with the harmony. Usually when the song is taught to kids, it's just played over a C chord the whole time, just repeating. When I hear this, it sounds a bit quirky to me, like something very tongue-in-cheek is happening here. And we could leave it be, but one thing I wanted to do is kind of flesh it out more and see what we can do. And the other thing is that F sharp clashes with the C note, and it creates a tritone, which is great if you're Black Sabbath, but maybe not for a lullaby. So I added a few more chords. The chord progression I use goes from C major to B minor to E minor 7 to A minor to G major back to C major. And some of these chords you wouldn't find in the major scale. That B minor chord in a major scale would be a diminished chord like this. But in this mode, you raise up the F and it becomes minor. With this chord progression, especially with all these minor chords, I get the sense of lightness in the face of something troubling. What do you think? Now, there are a lot of other things you could do to play around with this song, and we pass by that F sharp really quickly, so you could substitute chords easily. So let's arrange one more really quick. When the Saints Go Marching In is another song that I learned as a young kid. So it's a pretty simple melody played over 3 chords, C, G, and F. And those chords are broken up and played in this jaunty back and forth way to give it a jumpy ragtime feel. Now let's put it in Lydian mode, changing that F to an F sharp. And now it sounds like this. Well, it definitely feels quirkier, but you may have heard that clash between the F chord and the F sharp note towards the end. And that could work for you if that's what you want, but I get kind of a creepy carnival vibe, so I'm going to change it. It's too abrupt and abrasive for me. I'm going to change the F chord to a D major chord, which uses that F sharp note. Okay, one more time. Now that to me feels like the band might be marching towards something in particular. It's exciting to think about it. So that's how Lydian mode can affect a song. Now keep in mind, this is just one way to use Lydian. And honestly, it isn't done like this very often. Most times, composers will write moments of a song in Lydian before switching back out to major or minor. Or jazz musicians will use Lydian briefly in solos. But you can use it however you want. My goal here isn't to dictate to myself or to you when and where to use it, but rather to hear how the mode changes songs that I know and to give me a better sense of what it sounds like so that when I write music in the future, I have more ideas to pull from. And I hope you do too, or at least I hope you found this interesting. A Strange Arrangement was produced by me, Rob McCarthy. I edit and mix the show, and I wrote our theme music. Our artwork was done by Daniel Joel Newman, and you can find more of his work at danieljoelnewman.com. Special thanks to Elizabeth Stahl for notes and for that voice that you hear at the beginning of the show. If you like the show, please rate and review on Apple Podcasts, and check us out on Instagram at Strange Arrangement Podcast. And be sure to check out our website, asamusicpodcast.com, for sheet music, artist bios, and ways that you can get in touch with us. Next time, my guest adapts a song that means a lot to them and talks about their changes. So check that out next time on A Strange Arrangement.